Hello, I'm Cindy Ehrenberg-Seltzer, President and CEO of the Children's Services Council of Broward County. Welcome to another episode of Future First, Focus on Broward's Children. A safe, stable home is one of the most important foundations for a child's success. Yet for many families across Broward County, housing instability remains a real and urgent challenge, impacting a child's health, education, and overall well-being. When families face rising housing costs, financial hardship, or limited access to affordable options, the effects can be far-reaching. Children may experience stress disruptions at school and uncertainty, which can affect their ability to learn and grow. At the Children's Services Council of Broward County, we are committed to strengthening families and preventing crises before they happen. Funded by a small portion of local property taxes, we invest in programs and partnerships that connect families to critical supports like housing assistance, case management, and resources that promote long-term stability. Because housing is more than just a shelter, it's the foundation for opportunity. It's where children feel safe, supported, and able to thrive. Today, we're joined by a panel of community partners and experts who are working to address housing challenges and provide real solutions for Broward families. We'll explore available resources, how to access support, and what we can do together to ensure every child has a safe place to call home. Let's get started. Welcome to Nico Aguilar, Human Services Administrator, Broward County Housing Options, Solutions, and Supports. Sandra Vesey-Einhorn, Executive Director at the Coordinating Council of Broward. Serge Benjamin, Program Attorney for the Homeless Prevention Program at Legal Aid Services of Broward County. And Rebecca McGuire, VP, United for Housing at the United Way of Broward County. Welcome to all of you. What a great panel for this discussion. Sandra, the Coordinating Council of Broward, when we were re-energized, we said our focus is affordable housing, and you were the perfect choice for executive director, as this has been your passion for so many years. Can you talk about why, how, and what we've been able to accomplish over the last many years?
Sure. So housing is really the cornerstone of health, financial, emotional, mental, physical. And I think what was great about the Coordinating Council is there weren't any subject matter experts on housing. We had the critical players in child welfare, in education, and in healthcare. And I think everyone got to that moment where they realized that until we address housing instability and the housing affordability crisis, that all of these other silos were going to continue to have challenges. And so to me, what was exciting was the Coordinating Council really breathed new life into some of these housing affordability issues, because it wasn't just the usual suspects that were beating the same drum. It was an opportunity to engage the business community, our elected officials, and folks that work in other areas to say that if we don't address our housing situation, everything else is not going to be successful.
And our chair, Nan Rich.
That's correct. And when you've
Senator Nan Rich,
when
now
you've got someone so
commissioner.
passionate about it, and even the conversation around homelessness, and recently we were all together having a conversation about youth homelessness. At the end of the day, someone needs a safe and stable place to rest their head at night. Yes. And recognizing that as a community, I think, is one of the reasons why Broward has been so successful in delivering a toolbox full of strategies that have really allowed us to pave the way for the rest of the state, and in some respects, even the nation, to see what we can do when we engage different stakeholders from different parts of the community to have a conversation around housing affordability.
And Nico, when I rudely interrupted Sandra to cheer on our County Commissioner, former Senator Nan Rich, who has really championed this at the county. She learned about the issue and just has made it her passion. The county has played such a pivotal role in addressing these issues. Can you talk a little about
absolutely.
that?
Obviously, we have a huge advocate in Senator Rich, and my agency, our division, we're what we call the COC, which is the Continuum of Care, and we are in charge by federal statute to address, coordinate, and fund the majority of homeless services in Broward County. So if you are familiar with Task Force, we fund a lot of their programs. They're what we call our street outreach. We fund the majority of shelter beds in Broward County. And we fund the majority of housing. There's a lot of housing that we actually provide. As a matter of fact, half of our budget goes into housing. And then we have programs, and Sergey will talk about it. We don't do a lot of prevention, but that's something that I foresee happening. And but yeah, we actually do a lot of work. We fund a lot of services to address homelessness, and family homelessness is a big portion of that. We have. I think that we make it a priority, and maybe we'll talk more about the nuances of family and children homelessness.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to quickly jump in only because Nico mentioned that the county really doesn't fund a lot of prevention. And I find that lately there's a lot of conversation on how to strike that balance between investment into prevention versus investment in folks that are already homeless. Right. And so I want to give a huge shout out to the Children's Services Council and to the United Way and to all of our philanthropic partners that are more focused on the prevention side, because the county's role as the continuum of care is not necessarily to prevent, is not necessarily to fund prevention, but is really to be the funder of last resort and to really fund on the back end. So as we have these conversations about that balance of prevention versus being reactive, I think that it's always important to recognize that that's not necessarily the county's role, and it's why we're so grateful for those other community partners that recognize that we need to continue to really ensure that we prevent people from becoming homeless in the first place.
So because you mentioned prevention, I have to say, yes, that's what the Children's Services Council is all about. And so, Serge, I do want you to talk about that,
Prevention.
How we want to keep people in their homes.
Correct.
Oh, Lord, what a phenomenal program. And funded originally by Bob Manny of the Manny Foundation. Manny had this innovative idea that we do a lot for the people that are already out there and already in trouble, families and all. And if we could interrupt the reason why they would fall apart, we may wind up minimizing or at least reducing, abating the tremendous number of people that are subject to eviction and homelessness. So we target eviction primarily. With the Manny program, we started with just a few families in 2022, the latter part of 2022. And by 2023, we were doing like 75 families. By 2023 and 24, we've done 108 families. Wow. We are currently looking at approximately 280 plus families that we have touched through the various programs. One of those programs is the CSC program. Thank you so much for bringing us in, because CSC, the Children's Services Council, put in energy, effort. They put in education, because I'm really the least of these. I'm the guy in the trenches, which is what I've said to Mr. Manny when I was being considered for the position. I said, I've worked with homelessness for 12, 13 years, but where am I going? He said, well, you're going to prevent that from happening, and this is how we're going to do it. So we've had that opportunity. We've had opportunity to work with ASD to obtain funding when we have situations with clients that are about to fall off the cliff, so to speak. In the beginning was with Rebecca that we started working together, and this has grown to be so significant that right now there is an impact. And thank you, Nico, and thank you for Rebecca, and thank you for all of that work that we're privileged to do.
Thank you. One of the things that I absolutely love about that program is it is so emblematic of Collaboration County. Because, I mean, here you had this brilliant philanthropist Bob Manny, who said, I'm not just throwing money blindly at something. I really want to understand what the issue is, and I want to fund it in a smart, effective way. He tested this, and you and your brilliance showed it worked. At the Children's Services Council, we fund best practices, and we identified that as a best practice and said, we want in on that. But we also, then, to your point, we're connecting the dots with the nonprofits who we are funding, who are working with families in the community. We have something called the HEAL program, which is about helping families who have experienced trauma. And when they're dealing with that, they notice that a lot of the requests, a lot of the trauma stemmed from this fear of
Housing and
housing,
stability.
right? Or at least that was exacerbating the trauma that they were already having.
Correct.
And so now we can connect them with this program, with someone who's an expert who can prevent that. And then conversely, you're an expert on dealing with landlords and eviction, but you're not a social worker. So you can now refer out to the programs that can work with the families and help with the other issues. So it's really creating that system which can support families.
Families.
And Rebecca, I don't want to forget you,
Sure.
because the United Way has been such an important player with this. You personally for a long time, first at Hosty and now at the United Way, started out with a focus on veterans, but you've expanded that.
Yeah, I think when you talk about family homelessness, it's what's so critical about it, and I think we do not talk enough about prevention. I think we've got to drive that home. That's a return on investment, not just financially, but also emotionally with kids. And there's nothing more important than our future, which are our kids. And I think that putting more time into prevention, and prevention starts the minute we house somebody. I mean, sometimes we're like, oh, we house somebody, and you tend to think that you're done. Your job here is done, and your job is just beginning. Because we've seen this. We've seen people who are back at our door asking for help again because something didn't happen, something didn't work for them. And dealing with a history of unstable housing, sometimes you have to unlearn some of the behavior that you have around money and priorities and where you want to focus and concentrate on. So I think really focusing on the service side of prevention as well as just finding the funds to pay the rent is critical. And I think that's something that in the future, that's part of our large strategic plan that we're now writing again, is what does prevention look like? And how do we educate people? We had an eviction workshop at a library, and the questions that people asked, and I was thinking, when I was sitting there, I was thinking, you should be there because it's they don't understand what that means, and that scary word eviction, and they wait too long, and then you're Friday at 4 o'clock getting a crisis. So I think a lot of educating people what can happen if the moment that something happens in your life and you're not able to pay your rent. I think there needs to be a lot of awareness around that as well.
So I want to delve into that, but it struck me that I bet a lot of people who are watching are shocked to hear that families, I think they have a vision of homeless people as a drunk or someone who's having a psychotic break on the street, panhandling, and they're like, what do you mean families are homeless? So can you talk a little, who wants to pick
actually, when you mentioned the HEAL, I've done presentations for the HEAL navigators, explaining how the system of care works. And there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is resilience, and the other one is self-sufficiency. And talking specifically about family homelessness, the thing about family homelessness is that family homelessness is very different than your stereotypical homelessness. Families are not isolated just by by definition, and therefore they have this resilience. Sometimes the kids may be sleeping in somebody's home, grandmas, aunties, friends, and mom or dad may be sleeping in the car or in a shelter. So that makes family homelessness a little bit more complex. And the other thing is, navigating the system. When you have kids, when you have to provide different things, sometimes navigating the system becomes a little bit more complex. And again, I think most of the resources are kind of tailored for your traditional, stereotypical homeless individual. But I think we're doing a better job at, really looking. So we have talking about collaboration. We work with the school board, with the HEART program. Sandra, it's the chair of one of our committees. But we have several committees, and one of them is the Homeless Youth and Families Committee. And, like your staff, it's part of that. And it has been very helpful, really looking, okay, what are the indicators, when it comes to family homelessness? And the other piece is the self-sufficiency piece. Like Rebecca was saying, it's empowering our individuals and families to get out of the cycle. I say when we address family homelessness, we're not just addressing homelessness right now, we're addressing homelessness in the future.
Yes.
I've seen, just last week, I saw a case of a young lady with small kids, and when I was looking at her file, she came from a family that was homeless, and now, she was going through eviction, and it's, to see that cycle is heartbreaking. So I think that when we can empower, like these families, these children, and give them hope and break the stigma, we're really looking at in the long run.
Yeah, I think addressing myths and misconceptions as it relates to homelessness is important, both for the general public on how they view, folks that might be experiencing housing instability, but also, also for the families. It's such a vulnerable, emotional place to question whether or not you're going to be able to pay your rent, whether you're going to be able to pay your mortgage. And sometimes the end result is not necessarily thinking logically. So when you get that first note from your landlord about a possible eviction, what's fair might not be the same as what's legal. And so time after time, we find people that, it might not be fair, it might be so wrong, it might be so unethical, but it might still be legal. And so how do we systematically do a better job of helping people understand what their rights are, which I know is a conversation that I've had with, with the folks at Legal Aid. How do we do a better job of, families that are experiencing housing instability that might not currently identify as that, but might be receiving, might be working with a case manager on something else. How do we train those case managers to help them understand that when their client comes to them and says, hey, I just got this eviction notice, again, it might be unethical, it might be unfair, it might be completely wrong, but it's still legal, and here's what you need to do next. And so often moms, and as a mom, I can understand, again, when you're feeling vulnerable and you're wondering what's gonna happen to my kids, what's gonna happen to me, you might not make the best decision at that time because you're thinking about the what ifs. And so how do we do a better job of sort of normalizing this idea that you need to ask for help before it's too late? I think as parents, we try and teach our kids that, but then as we get older, there's sort of that pride and self-sufficiency, and there's sort of this desire to think, no, I'll figure it out, I'll figure it out, I'll figure it out, until it gets to be too late, and then you realize, oh wow, now I'm in crisis, and now, now what do we do? What do we need to do? So to me, that next phase of conversation is how, as a community, we really address what some of those common myths and misconceptions are about what someone's rights are and what someone's rights are not when they're facing imminent, even before, the first time you miss your rent, what happens? What's your best case scenario when you first miss that rent payment, as opposed to 6 months later, you've missed 6 months of rent, and now you're thinking, okay, every day you're coming home with that anxiety of, is there going to be something on the door saying that?
All right, so Serge, the door is open for you, and we've got viewers out there who want to know.
I'd like to hit one thing first, is that Tony Karat, whom you remember at Legal Aid of Broward County, pulled me one day and he says, I'm going to send you to work with homeless. I know nothing about homeless. I was doing all kinds of other things for Legal Aid, but I didn't know anything about homeless. And so I went to see the supervising attorney at the time, and I said, I don't know anything about this. Are these homeless people the people that I see on the bench? The ones that are being chased out of the park? And she says, sit down, you got a lot to learn. And there started my education with Martella Boris on what legal rights were for the homeless people. Homeless people are people. They go through the same kind of trouble that most of us go through. And talking about misconception is the person who's working with the family today, in today's environment, with the rental problems that we have currently, it's paycheck to paycheck. it is a moment's notice that something happened. One incident can throw off a very delicate financial balance in the house of someone, especially someone with children. So our priorities, first of all, is the children and the family. So I have a number of cases in front of us. I prioritize the families first. I have to, because then the impact is everlasting and the impact is so much more. But there is, in my analysis of cases, a significant need for education. The very basic kind of education. We're talking about financial education. If I have $10, can I spend 11? And the answer is no, but half the time when I'm doing a budget for a client to see whether or not I can make an assessment that is valid for what that client is going through, I'm not able to do that because client will spend money where clients should not spend the money. Or sometimes clients think this is the best decision, but it's not. You got children. You're not going to go and do this, that, and the other. If rental is not your priority, then you're going to wind up in the street, living in your car. Because the landlord also is running a business.
Yeah.
He's not running a charity. He's running a business. So in order to partner with the landlord, we have to be able to identify his wants, identify the needs of the client, which is our primary goal, and then to see whether or not we can work the two together to make something happen for the client.
So let me just pause there for a second, because I want to emphasize a point that I think you just made, which is if I am making a decision about where to spend the money that I have, crises have come up, different things happen, but the first thing I need to pay is that rent.
Is that right?
Because other things can wait, but the rent cannot. So anything nice to have, even if it's critical, it's still going to be pay the rent first, because that's where the landlord will take action.
And because having a roof over your head is so important. I mean,
Well,
to think about the fact that
I think that's true.
half of Broward County residents, according to the most recent United Way Alice report, could not withstand a $500 financial emergency.
Yeah.
is sobering. I mean, that's staggering. That's a
staggering.
toothache. That's a car not running properly. That's traveling a lot and gas being what it is. I mean, $500
I think we're
for a
getting
family that's paycheck to paycheck
excited, and
is.
for some reason that excitement is important. We said pay the rent first. That's what I want to tell everybody. But I do understand that I have a death in the family. And in our community, a death in the family means my sister, my brother, and my other sister, we're going to get together. Everybody's going to put $500 or whatever it takes to bury the loved one. They get this. We have to get this. It's not just about money. So now the client says, this happened. Or here's the simplest one. I have a clunker, and that's the one that takes me to work to Boca. And if the clunker goes down and I need to repair, that's a $1,500 repair. If my rent is $1,500, I'm out of at least a month's rent.
Right.
If I lose a job,
Then it's
and
all
it takes
lost.
us, what,
It's all
a
gone.
couple of months to get a new job? Maybe you get a little more money, maybe you get a little less. I need help. And our analysis is to go beyond just plain numbers. Because if I just look at plain numbers, 5 and 5, that's 10, you spending 12, you don't qualify. That doesn't work.
Right.
But when we're looking and we say, there is a logical reason here, there is a reason, and there is sustainability. In other words, if that bump on the road didn't happen, that client will keep on going. Those kids will continue to go to school, and things will continue to go. Although it is the sad state of affairs, at the very least, the maintenance of even keel is something we should look forward to.
Absolutely. And I can't believe how fast this time has gone. And Rebecca, I've hardly gotten you in, so you get the last 2 minutes.
Okay. I think one of the things we have to talk about, and I'm really excited to announce that United Way has bought a building.
Yes.
And 28 units, they are all 2-1s. And we also have a workforce component to it, a workforce development. Because how many people do we come across that we talk about, we make an assessment, who are underemployed? Whether by the number of hours they work
That's part of
or
it.
the skill level. So we become a very firm believer. It is one of the pillars that we're going to put in our strategic plan, that workforce development and housing, we used to talk about those separately. There's now that conversation has to happen together. You've got some people who are incredibly bright. Maybe they don't have the credentials, but they certainly have the competencies.
Yes.
And so we want to reach out and figure out how we can help those individuals, working with our partners like at Goodwill, and trying to figure out how do we help them lift up, get a better job, so that that $500 maybe becomes more like a $200 or $100, right? So they don't go into a critical crisis. And I think that those conversations also lead to prevention. When we're doing prevention, we should be talking about workforce development. So, what are you doing that we need to help you put yourself in a better position? Because you talked about generational poverty and generational homelessness. It's a very, very real thing. It's almost becomes sometimes a way of life, and it goes from generation to generation. We should be talking about home ownership. We should have more programs that help people in poverty buy homes because it builds the generational wealth. So I think there's some ideas out there and some innovation, and I know that's something that you love to do. That can really help make an impact on this.
When it comes to workforce development, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Career Source.
Yes.
Folks need to
Workforce
connect
One.
there. They can do a lot of upskilling. And of course, when it comes to housing, we don't have time to get into it now, but the county's investment into creating more affordable housing.
Yes.
Again, this is another one of those episodes that I wish I had another half hour to get into because there is so much rich information here. But thank you all so much. This has been amazing, and I think provided our audience with a lot of great information. So thank you to Nico, Sandra, Serge, and Rebecca, and all of you who are watching. As I hope you've seen, we work together to build a brighter future for Broward's children and families, and you can be a part of it or take advantage of it. I've been your host, Cindy Arenberg-Seltzer. For this or any other episode of Future First, Focus on Broward's Children, go to our website, cscbroward.org, where you can access our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on social media. And remember to join us next time on Future First, Focus on Broward's Children.
Don't forget about being a kid. Don't forget about paying it forward. Don't forget about love and purpose. Service is the mission, baby. Listen with love, listen with love, listen with love. Talk to your kids, ask them what's up. And listen up with love. Listen with love, listen with love, listen with love. Kick it with your kids, remember you were one. And listen up with love.